Hey everybody, Dave Anderson here with another quick tip. This one is for 3 simple ways that you can use subtle textures and patterns to add a sense of depth and visual interest to your PowerPoint or e-learning slides. Now, adding backgrounds and textures is one of the best and fastest ways to transform flat and two-dimensional feeling slides into slides that have a sense of depth and visual interest and richness. And the best part is you don't have to redesign your slides to make this work. You can just add this effect, and in most cases, you don't have to tweak anything. So we'll look at backgrounds, image overlays, and frames and borders, and those 3 areas and how we can make this work. First up, let's look at what we can do with the slide background. Now, slide backgrounds are the largest slide element, so they're an obvious choice for adding subtle textures and patterns to create that visual interest or a sense of depth. So let's take a look at how it works with backgrounds. All right, so let me select the background slide here. So the first thing we want to do is just look at adding a simple rectangle to our slide. So actually what I can do is just bring in a shape here, rectangle, very common shape that we work with in e-learning. Now I want to bring open 2 of my panels. I want to bring open my selection pane, so I'm just going to pop that open. And then with this rectangle, I'm going to fill this with a white color for now, and let's just make sure the shape outline is off. There it is. And with this, I'm going to open up my format, my shape format. So I'm just going to right click and then choose Format Shape down here in the bottom. And what I want to do is, first we're going to begin working with the pattern fill. So the pattern fill is right here. So choose pattern fill, and these are the built-in patterns. Now a lot of times these are going to give you all that you need. So you can see we have dots and lines and stripes and different patterns. Maybe I'll just go with a large grid here. So when I click that, you're going to see a foreground color and a background color. So most times this is not going to be the colors that you'll work with because it's just going to be too contrasting with the elements. So typically you want to first begin with whatever background color you want. Since my slide background is white, that makes the most sense, I think, here. And then for the foreground color, I'm just going to choose a really light version of that blue, or I could go with a gray. But when I change that to a real light version of the gray, and let's send this now to the back. So right click, send to back. And again, so let's just visually get this up here. So there's a pattern fill. If you feel like it's conflicting or causing readability issues, one thing you can do is maybe make your text darker. But if it is persisting across the entire project, I don't know that I can make that text dark enough to work here. It's still going to compete with my text. So what I'm going to do is come back to my shape fill for my pattern, and let's choose another color here for foregrounds. This time maybe something that's a white with a little transparency. Let me make sure I selected that. All right, so here we go. That's going to work a lot better. You can see that's really a light texture, but it's not competing with my text, and it gives my background just a sort of tactile feel. It adds a slight element to it, but it doesn't obviously overwhelm or detract from the overall theme and design. So the pattern fills are a great way to get started. Now, it's hard to kind of see once you've set that foreground and background color a little lighter, a little tougher to see these. So if you're trying to find another one, just find a really contrasting color. Now you can quickly see the different patterns we have. So maybe a brick tile, and I'm going to come right back here and grab that other one. And again, super subtle, right? You almost can't see it, but it does add, if I bring open my selection pane right here, it does add just a subtle richness to the slide without detracting from, again, the readability of the text or competing with any other on-slide elements. So, whoops, a little too fast. Those are the couple ways that you can work with those patterns. Again, if you can't find the pattern you're looking for, just temporarily set that foreground color a little brighter, and then you can go in and find something else. The polka dots obviously might work as well, and we probably need to bring that down. Yeah. So again, that's just another way that you can look at working with backgrounds. Now we can also work with dedicated pixel textures, image files that we can use as a repeating pattern here. So to do that, we'll just click Picture or Texture Fill, and we're going to go find a picture. So I have some subtle textures that I've downloaded either from subtletextures.com or pixel patterns that I found on free sites or just made in Photoshop. So I'm going to go ahead and find my image from File, Local Desktop, and Pictures and Textures. Let's see, Pixel Patterns, and I can't really see those here, so let's just bring this up. All right, so these are my patterns. I have a It looks like a grid. I've got a single square, another grid, and some lines. So I'm going to let's just grab the grid. I think the grid's a little bit easier to see. So I'll select that, open this, and when you first see that, this is what you're going to look at. It's going to fill the entire, let's bring that to the front. So what it's doing is it's just taking that picture, bring to front, and repeating it throughout the whole slide. But what we want to do is just tile that as a picture, and watch this, tiled, and there we go. Everything fits great. Now, again, because that is an image file, I don't have any control over that the black line. So in order to make this work with this image, I'm just going to dial up that transparency somewhere around 80 or 90, and that should make it work a lot better. And again, we've got some better contrast here with our text. So when you're working with the images, you're going to certainly want to work with transparency to control how much of that comes through. Again, other than just this, the pixel pattern, we could also come in and work with some additional types of patterns. We've got some dust scratches or paper textures. Let's try the dust scratches real quick. Let's take a look at what we have. A little tough to see right here, so I'll grab one of these that's a little bit more dramatic. And again, right, so if I turn that all the way down and send that to the back, that's going to be too much. But what we do, just start dialing in that transparency. And again, those lines create just a subtle texture to our slide that we otherwise wouldn't have with that flat, solid white fill for the background. And let's just try one more, and then we'll move on to clicking too quickly here. Let's find one more and see, this time maybe with a paper type texture. Paper textures right here. Should have brought that up. And any one of these is going to be fine. So there's a paper. And so that's what we're looking at. And then we just want to turn this up and bring that somewhere around 80 or so%. So it's hard to see it. There are some nuances and little artifacts in there. But again, what we're looking for is a subtle transformation, nothing that's overly dramatic or causes us to rework how our slides look. We're just trying to add something to that background. And again, you can dial in as much or as little as you like. You can see a little bit better right there with some of those artifacts. So just a couple ways that we can work with the backgrounds. All right, pretty cool effect, right? All right, next we're going to look at image overlays. Now, when you're building presentations or e-learning courses, you're probably working with stock photos. They're one of the most common visual asset that we work with. And one of the biggest challenge with working with stock photos is that they sometimes appear a little too crisp or clean or overly polished, which can make the images feel inauthentic or disconnected from the rest of your project. Now, by applying the subtle textures and pixel patterns as overlays, you can create a visually engaging and distinctive look that adds depth and personality to your presentation or e-learning course design while still maintaining clarity and focus for your content. Let me show you how this works. All right, let's look at some image overlay effects that we can add. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in some bitmap images. So let's find those pictures here. Picture from device. And this time we're looking for distressed overlays, and I'll pull this up. So at first, these look like, you're not going to put this over an image, are you? That's not going to work. Well, it might. Let's go ahead and just click this, and there's our big graphic. Now, when you insert images in PowerPoint, typically those images are going to want to scale by aspect ratio. So if I wanted to make this fit one of the images, I really can't. So I'm going to deselect the lock aspect ratio, and just so I can scale this, transform it differently. I don't really care if it's proportionate or maintaining the same aspect ratio. All right, so covering up the image, again, transparency is how we're going to make this, how we're going to work this. Oops, image, and then transparency, and dial that transparency way up. There we go. And now we're adding just a subtle distressed texture here to our image. And since I already have this first one set up, I can copy it. So Control C, Control V, and then let's put it over this other airplane image right here, or the family that's about ready to go on a trip. And again, I'm going to play with the transparency. I don't want to overly transform this, but I want to certainly make this enough that it looks like there's some consistency, some visual consistency between the images. So it looks pretty good, right? And if I turn these two off, here are my two images, my crisp images. And if I want to add that overlay, just a nice way to give those something a little different. Again, that muted look, that muted feel is certainly another way to transform an image without detracting from the overall color scheme or the overall image style. And again, we could also work with rectangles and the basic pattern fills to add the grids and the polka dots and the lines like we just saw. All right, finally, let's take a look at using these subtle textures and patterns as overlays for image borders and frames. We're not going to apply it to the entire slide. I guess you still could, but what we'll do is just look at ways to add this effect to image borders. And so it's a smaller area that we're affecting, but it's a nice way to give your images, your graphics, a nice visual treatment without, again, having to redesign the entire course. So let's take a look at how that works. Right, let me bring in just an image here real quick. So I'm just going to grab this image, Control C, and bring it in right here. So the idea is we're going to add these patterns to our frames. And it guys gives a nice textured look for the frame. Of course, this is sort of a Polaroid feel. In this case, if that's what you're going for, great. Or we could just use the fill, the border as a way to add a texture of any type to the image and give it something just a little bit more to stand out and maybe create some contrast between the image and the background. So I'm just going to bring in a rectangle shape, and we'll just draw that shape around our image here. And with that, I'll right click, choose send to back. And I probably do want to keep it white, but it doesn't have to be. Actually, we could keep it dark and then add a pattern fill that way. So with that shape selected, we're going to do just what we did with the backgrounds. We're going to try the pattern fill. So we'll see what the pattern fill looks like. And there's a polka dot. I think it looks pretty good right out of the first try. Maybe a grid. That's going to be a little high contrast, so maybe not so much there. And then a polka dot frame. And again, if you want to minimize this, you could always just make that rectangle just a little bit smaller right around the image, and you don't see as much of it. Or if you want more of that effect, bring that image out. So I'm going to play with a couple of these real quick and see how those look. And again, if you feel like that pattern is just overwhelming, like this one, let's just change that foreground color to something subtle, a little softer. I'm just going to play with some variations here. And maybe it's just, less is more in these examples, right? So there's another frame border that we could set up with the image. Another option you have for working with these is we could start to look at using some of those other background images or textures. If I come in here to selection pane, let me see what I have in here for frames and borders. Yep, I've got a few other ones here. Let me just pull this open here. Delete that. And background pattern. So that was an image that we used as a fill for the background. Another thing we could do, and this is a little bit out there, but I'll bring in a picture. Let's see. I think I had the starburst, right? So this is kind of interesting. And it would seem like it might be too overwhelming for a single image, but we bring this in and then scale this down. And let's take this one off, delete, and bring this to the back, send to back. So it's not subtle by itself, but when you put it behind an image, it is nice and subtle, right? That big old starburst right there is minimized. So we just see a little bit of those light leaks coming down through the image. So just another idea for using images. Could be a blurred background type effect or any type of dust and scratch. I think I had some other examples here for those. But I like the idea of continuing, let's see, working with these types of images. Light shadows. I think that would be a good one for the background. Let me try this and see what it looks like. Bring this up to the top. And then we just need to make that bigger. Yeah, that might not be as nice. Again, unless we crop this, I guess, to either side. Right, crop it to the image. Delete that one. Yep. Again, like any of these, it's if you keep it minimized and you're not overly using it, you're going to find, I'm just going to turn off this scaling here of these images so I can better size that. If you keep it real minimized in terms of how much that effect, right, it almost kind of looks like a Safari effect, and nothing says that you can't come in here again and then turn on, just dial up some additional transparency for that image border. But nice effect right there. And all of this is going to work just equally well on dark backgrounds. So if I pull open selection pane, I should have a bunch of examples here. Here's one with the grid. Really like the dark look if that's the style that you're working with in your course. Here's another one with the dust and scratches. So in this case, right, the dust and scratches, since it was a darker image, in some ways actually looks really good. So how much of that transparency? It works as it is. So try one more here, and then I'll let you all go. And this is another grid pattern right here. Oh, and then here's the scratches that I was looking at, right? So you can see the scratches. That's too much, a little too strong. But if we come into our transparency, dial that up, then we get some of that subtle texture, depth, visual interest without overwhelming our slide designs. All right, so to wrap it up, adding simple textures and patterns to your slide backgrounds is a great way to quickly add visual interest, depth, and a unique aesthetic for your presentations and e-learning courses. Now, a quick word of caution: when using patterns and textures in your presentations or slide designs, you should always prioritize readability and clarity. Overusing or selecting high contrast patterns can certainly impact your readability. It can make your slides look cluttered and detract from your overall message. With all that said, is this something you would use in your own projects? Let me know down below in the comments. Thanks to you all so much, and hope you enjoyed it. Later.